Be Honest with Dr. Yana. Join me for honest conversations with experts, get practical advice that will help you to better navigate your relationships and empower you to create meaningful and lasting connections. Fridays on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM. Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. And we are back on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM. And you are, as always, with Be Honest with Dr. Yana. Today we have a fantastic guest with us, Victor Morgado. Gotta pronounce
Hello.
that name right? Correctly.
Hello. Yes,
Hello, Victor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
you're welcome.
We were going to talk today about women as psychopaths. And the interesting thing about it is that we probably think that psychopaths are the ones that are normally killing people,
Hmm.
going around on a killing spree, serial killers, right? But we don't even have to go that far because psychopathy can be something different and something that we're not accustomed to. Those are called probably the socialized psychopath.
Hmm.
They're not going on a killing spree. However, they are very destructive. Nevertheless, and sometimes, or quite often, we cannot recognize it right away, and it takes years sometimes to pin that problem. Right, Victor?
It is true. And it's also known that a psychopath of that magnitude usually destroys 40 lives in their existence.
That's actually a big number. That's what we probably know about, right? But the majority of cases, the victims, the number of victims is much more. It is my
Oh boy.
understanding.
Hmm.
Yes. So, Victor, could you tell us something about yourself? Where are you from, and what makes you so special? I know that you're an artist. Tell
Yes.
us about it.
I am an artist. I am from Puerto Rico. I came to New York in 1970 to study art. And by 1984, I went to France. And I lived in France like nearly 10 years when I was there. Um, Basically, it was a very rich experience. I had to learn French, discover myself again, like I did when I came to New York. I didn't speak English when I came to New York. And I had to teach myself English actually, because I'm self taught in many things I do. And the same with the French, the same with the painting. Um, but it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of conquering a lot of insecurity and going through a lot of things like that. When I was in France, I about 4 years prior to my return to the US, I had this spiritual, I would say, crisis when I was there. And I spent time in a monastery, in the monastery St. Pierre of Solem. It's a Benedictine monastery. And I was able to, I don't know, like straighten my life a little bit that I had over there and make plans to return to the US. And that's what I did.
I was disappeared for a second. Uh, Being an artist is not an easy thing, right? And it also requires a lot of introspection. And I know that uh, you would have to go through a lot of soul searching as
Hmm.
well. And this is what you did. And did you have this idea of becoming an artist from the very beginning?
Yes, I felt my call to be an artist when I was like about very little, like 5, 6 years. And that came through my mother because my mother was very creative and she was constantly drawing. And she guided me a lot into being an artist. And then, of course, I saw a movie when I was 8 years old. It was called The Horse's Mouth with Alec Guinness.
Hmm.
It was about a painter in London, an elderly painter. And when I saw this movie, I knew this was going to be my life. And I was only 8 years. So it wasn't until I was 13 that I came to New York for my first trip out of Puerto Rico. And I went to visit my uncle, who was an artist. He was an opera singer, a painter, a pianist, so he kind of inspired me a lot. And after 1970, I started building my path in New York.
So you probably did not expect to get into contact with destructive people in your life, just like all of us, right? We
Ex-
come with good intentions.
yes.
We want to build good relationships with everybody. It's
Hmm.
ingrained in our human nature. And probably that was the least of your expectations to even marry the person that would not be supportive of your aspirations of you being, of course, an artist. That would, in fact, try to destroy your life and the life of your kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Victor, when you met your uh, ex-wife,
Hmm.
what was she like? Was she charming, or did
She
she show
was.
anything?
Hmm, I was in Spain at the time. I went to do a pilgrimage. Like the walk of Compostela, which is about 500 miles by foot. And about 10 days prior to my end, I saw this woman that looked very mysterious. I don't know that's what I can describe. She looked very mysterious, very introvert. She was a very introvert girl. And I thought she was like from Chile or somewhere like that in South America, but she was actually from Belgium. She was Flemish, and I don't know what to tell you. I just saw her. I said hello in English and in Spanish, and she responded in Spanish, and I figured, oh, it's a Spanish girl. So I began to walk with her, and I don't know what went through my mind that I said, I think I will have children with this woman. That's what went through my mind. And it happened just like that.
But I also know that you also have a great intuition.
It is true.
And that is so interesting that you intuitively felt that you will marry that woman. And she did not show any negative traits from the beginning, right? Was she charming? Was she nice?
She was nice, very, she was seductive. She was very seductive. The way she looked at me and in a very mysterious way because she was very introvert. And I felt kind of charmed by her interest in me. I I had my doubts about it, but I was very also involved at the time with the religions. I was involved with the Catholic religion at the time, and in the Catholic religion, there is this belief, that everything is possible, with Jesus and whatever. And I remember having a conversation with her, and she was very honest, actually, in a very miraculous way, by telling me we shouldn't be together because I see that you're a good person and I'm not a good person. I mean, she told me this, and I was so, oh no, how can we say things like that? It's like in the spiritual world we can change things and everything is possible for Jesus. But the fact was that in those 9 days we got involved physically, and by being involved physically, I was attached to the experience, and I didn't want to give up the experience. That was basically what happened. And I just entered on that path. So eventually, we would saw each other for about 2 weeks every 6 months for the first couple of years. And it was a honeymoon every time I saw her. I went to Belgium, she came to New York, and it was a beautiful thing. And I was already turning 43, and I figured, okay, it's time for me to get married, have someone, be with somebody, everything is fine. And I went ahead and did it. Brought her to New York, you know, and eventually I married her because I was within the Catholic doctrine that you have to get married and have a family. And this is exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to do something good. I mean, have a family
And
and
you
not have.
came with good intentions, of course. The interesting thing that you mentioned, Victor, is that she said from the very beginning, she recognized that you're a good person, and she said, "I'm not so good."
Hmm.
The the important thing in that statement is that usually narcissists and psychopaths, they would reveal to you that they are not good people from the very beginning. And
Hmm.
the problem with that is that we, as good people, starting with good intentions, and of course wanting to continue in the same manner, we don't believe that. We don't believe that, and we're just thinking, oh, the person's probably modest. Nevertheless, they are already telling you what they're all about, and
Of
we
course.
must listen to it.
Hmm. Definitely. Also, they manipulate a lot. So they can use the truth to manipulate a little bit and get some confidence or
Oh,
make you
absolutely.
trust them, you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, if you look at the definition of the psychopathy in the common sense of it, or probably the psychopathic personality, it's a personality construct which is characterized by impaired empathy and remorse and bold, disinhibited, and egocentric traits,
Hmm.
which are in turn masked by superficial charm and the outward appearance of apparent normalcy.
Hmm.
And if we look at that, there is extreme lack of empathy. Nevertheless, when it is masked by extreme charm, we do not notice that. And they
Of
may be
course.
manipulative,
Hmm.
absolutely charming, like you said, exploitative. And they
Yes.
behave in an impulsive and risky manner.
Yes, they can pretend empathy because it's like a way of acting, you know, and they are aware of who they are, and they are very good in pretending these things. For example, she can, one of the things she did is that she put photos of me with her all over with frames all over the wall. So no one ever did that for me before, and I was like so impressed by this to see my picture on the wall in somebody's house in Belgium. And it was like a
Mm.
loving story that you see a narration through those photos,
Mhm.
you know. And this is something that I also saw in her mother's house, you know. And I think, and what I analyzed later is that they were actually surviving her father. Her father was really um, what I would call also a psychopath, but not an introvert psychopath. You know, he was kind of very aggressive and abusive with them verbally. And so I figured that's what happened. But by seeing her so sweet and so pretty, I could have never, I mean, figured this out. It took me forever. I mean, the only thing I could see in her was passive aggressiveness after 10 years of being with her. And I figured passive aggressiveness, that should be maybe some sort of disorder that I should investigate. And I began to do the research, and I found out that they were considering to have it in the book somewhere in psychiatry as a real former disorder, but they still hadn't taken decisions about it. I spoke to many therapists, and none of them could figure this out. They just weren't specialized on this or never understood what the situation was.
How soon after a marriage did you decide that there's something wrong and you wanted to look it up?
Frankly, it took me a long time because she was able to convince me that I was wrong, that it was my imagination, that I was imagining things. And I guess I had an insecurity that made me doubt. I was doubting myself, and I had a lot to lose. Also, I have two children now. I have a daughter and a son, and I had to take care of the family. And I was trying to have a positive outcome out of this. So I figured maybe it's me. Maybe I'm imagining too many things, and I began to distrust my own feelings. I began to distrust myself, actually, in my way of thinking. And that was the beginning of more manipulation upon me through the end of the marriage. At the end, it was it was like panic for me because I realized that she had manipulated everything to a certain time to demand a divorce. And how she did it was that she calculated the dates of all the gatherings that we will have with friends for things like the first communion of my son, the first communion of my daughter, all of these family gatherings. After the last gathering, that was the first communion of my daughter. When that gathering ended, she told me, "Me and you are no longer together." She said it just like that. And I was like in shock. Uh, that night, I couldn't sleep. And then all the pieces began to fall together. And I really couldn't sleep. I went to work and I nearly passed out in my job from lack of sleep in the kind of work that I was doing. They had to call an ambulance. I ended up in the hospital, and I ended up finding a cardiologist who ironically became my therapist. He had really gone through the same experience at the same time with his own wife. He had gotten divorced and he understood my problem. So he began to give me advice in how to behave, in what to do, what not to do. And he's actually still my cardiologist, like almost 18 years after. And
And
this
how interesting that he was right there at the time when you needed him.
that is true.
And this is what you're doing here, uh, telling your story in order also to warn other people how
Hmm.
things can be. And a lot of people can relate to this. And we're not being empty worded here, of course. So we are not going to just diagnose anyone with psychopathy without having anything to substantiate these claims. Now, Victor, you said that we're going to jump a little further. Then we're going to come back to this. You said that the psychologist that of your children, in fact, said that your ex-wife and the mother of your children, she was a psychopath. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes. That was a psychologist that I spoke to. That I called him actually to help me figure things out with my daughter.
Hmm.
And then when I mentioned it, he was the one who said used the word psychopath. But when he used it, that was like an eureka moment for me. Everything became clear. I saw everything clear after that.
Well, Victor, this is not anything new, in fact, under the sun. However, we never think that it is going to come into our lives. Psychopathy, whether that is averted or covered, socialized or murderous, right, is something that existed for centuries. However, when we try to establish the good normal relationship and live a normal life, and this comes into our lives, we become discombobulated. We don't know what to do. But
Hmm.
the thing is that we shouldn't blame ourselves. And why? Because even the scientists who have been studying psychopathy for years and writing papers on that, sometimes it is possible to even fool them. And
Hmm.
why is that? Because, as I mentioned already, that we all, as humans, we are creatures
Hmm.
of excuse me, creatures that want to live together in one society, regardless whether that is individualistic society uh, or not, or collectivistic. This is something that affects every person on earth,
Mm-hmm.
because as good human beings with good intentions, we do want to build uh, good relationships, whether that's professional, familial, or with the opposite sex, in the relationships,
Mm-hmm.
intimate relationships. However, psychopaths, they can be so charming, like you said, that you will not even know or suspect that there's anything wrong. And of course, that is a calculated charm in order to manipulate you
Yes, yeah,
and to
exactly.
make you do what they want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for us as humans, we don't want to have any kinds of arguments. We don't want to have fights. We
Of
want to
course.
have good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, that is not that person's intent.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we have the blind side.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing wrong with us.
Of course, yes. I this is when you were talking. I remember this the trial of Johnny Depp with
Uh huh.
Amber Heard. That was a very important trial for people who have been going through this experience, because that victory was our victory. The victory of that trial for this guy was really our victory. I felt it like that because it's the first time I understood what he went through. And it was the first time that I saw, particularly a man, to win in this situation and to be able to prove about the other person who the other person was in public, which is something nearly impossible to do. He did it. And that's once again, that gave me a lot of confidence to see this, to see the whole trial.
And comfort as well.
Yes, a lot of comfort,
That there are
exactly.
other people are actually going through what you went through, and they're
Hmm.
talking about it.
Yes.
But the thing is that it's not a really nice story that we all want to share. It is
Mm.
something that we want to keep to ourselves because of sometimes we're ashamed of it. Sometimes we don't want to appear in bad light in front of other people that all
Yeah.
look at the situation that you got yourself into.
Hmm.
But nevertheless, if we don't talk about it, there will be people who also will be thinking that, I'm in that situation. Probably something is wrong with me. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that we're all perfect. We are not perfect. We have our own vices, of course.
Yes.
But when there is a pattern of behavior, psychopathic pattern of behavior, that cannot be overseen. So, Victor, I know that she not only, of course, was very destructive with your life as a partner together in the marriage, but also children. And I know that as you told me, she disowned your daughter.
Yes, she did. She brought my daughter one day to a psychiatrist and told the psychiatrist, I don't want to be with her. I don't want to be her mother anymore. The psychiatrist couldn't believe it. And she just said, well, you don't understand. This is what I mean. I do not want to be her mother anymore. And that was the end of the story. And my daughter took it as it was because she was like 14 and living her independence. She has a very strong independent spirit. But that affected her tremendously, you know, very badly. And
But for the 14-year-old, this is the time when she establishes herself
of
almost
course,
as
yes.
independent, not so much as independent human being, but
Hmm.
also she needs to know that there are people in her life that love her, that
Yes.
she is in a safe environment. And if she is not, that could become the beginning of the path
Mm,
of so many different problems in the lives of the
mm,
child.
yes, that is true.
And then, did you know that? Did you know at that time how it affected your daughter?
No, because what happened is that we were estranged totally. because my daughter did not want to stay with me because she didn't want my discipline. I wanted to learn, to teach her how to do her laundry and do little things like that in the house. And she wasn't happy. And she told me, look, I'd rather go with mom because she doesn't ask me to do anything like this. So she
Typical
left.
teenage behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she didn't want to come back to the house. And the mother was happy because she can prove that I was a bad dad, you see, by the daughter not coming to me. So eventually we went to see, I saw a couple of psychiatrists, particularly after she tried to commit suicide 3 days after she left my house in her mother's house. And I was the one who brought her to a psychiatrist. They sent her to another big hospital and they decided to keep her there. Uh, she told all the psychiatrists that I did not love her. And I couldn't understand because we had as much as a loving relationship as we could have, but I couldn't understand. And I'm a loving person that I know about, you know what I mean? So I just couldn't understand what was going on. But I found that that was also a manipulation actually that maybe she was in some trauma that she had to say that. But after that, she still used it as a manipulation, my own daughter, because it was a manipulation not to come to me and to be able to remain free with the mother because the mother will not look for after her. I just let her to be free, do drugs, hang out until 3 o'clock in the morning. It was not a problem for my daughter to do those things. So it was in her interest in that case to say that I didn't love her. And that's why she didn't want to be with me.
And that is one of the main manipulations that they can pull on people, just to say that other people,
Hmm.
your father or your mother, don't love you. And
Exactly.
that has a huge effect on child's psyche because at 14, she was still a child. And she
Hmm.
did not know that she can come to you, of course, for comfort, because she was manipulated by her mother into
Yes,
thinking that you don't care about her.
exactly. Exactly. This is exactly what happened. Yeah.
This is very sad when this happens. And but when we think about it, you mentioned that she had a lot of passive aggressive behavior.
Yes.
And with passive aggressive behavior, that could be also the sign of narcissism, particularly um, covert narcissism, vulnerable narcissism.
Hmm.
And if we don't know the distinction from the overt narcissism, which are also called grandiose narcissists, we
Yes.
will never think that the person is also manipulative. It took you a while, of course, you waited for someone else to pinpoint the problem, and the psychologist finally said that it is psychopathy. But nevertheless, you yourself already noticed that something was wrong. There is a notion called as a vulnerable narcissist. And we know about grandiose narcissism, of course, when they
Hmm.
exhibit grandiosity and arrogance, when they crave attention and admiration. They have inflated sense of self-importance and
Exactly.
quite often, yeah, dominate the conversations and expect to be recognized as superior.
Hmm.
um, we have met so many people that would exhibit these traits. They can also be very charismatic and charming,
Hmm.
which also may become angry or aggressive when criticized and not given special treatment. And
Hmm.
this is something you also noticed with your ex-wife, that every time that you try to correct something or bring up a problem,
Hmm.
there was she unleashed anger at you.
Hmm. Yes. They the problem with this type of people is that they feel they have something in their ego that do not allow them to accept a fault, that they are at fault. And when you insist or you uncover them, it's almost like you stab them with a knife in the heart. It's very painful to them to accept it. um, they couldn't accept not to be perfect. It's just like I'm perfect. That's the way they feel, you know. And I really, in the beginning, I admire her for that. It's not that I saw that there was a lot of perfection in her. I don't know, for whatever reason. Not that I said that she was perfect, but she was very, she's Germanic, so she was very structured into doing things, you know, which I didn't have. You know, I was very dispersed. I wasn't too disciplined, and she was very structured, uh, becoming self-employed, becoming a web designer. Everything just came out in such a pace that I really admire those qualities in this person. And she was my wife, so I figured, okay, I'm on the right track with this. But that was just the beginning of my fall. You know, like it's like those are good, you know, traits in her character, but it had to do with perfection and believing in her own perfection.
Hmm. So, what out of covert narcissism did she do? What kind of symptoms? What kind of words did she use in order for you to understand that this is passive aggressive behavior?
Wow, I'm trying to think.
Well,
Um,
while you're thinking, it's I'm gonna say a few words about the vulnerable narcissists,
okay,
because what happens, just like you mentioned, they do appear shy, reserved, or withdrawn. And you said that she was an introvert, and could quite be, but nevertheless, they do show uh, the type, the characteristics of personality to
yeah,
appear shy, withdrawn. They crave recognition, but actually avoid the spotlight. And perhaps by you being the artist, maybe she really craved that kind of attention as well. But nevertheless, express the feelings of inadequacy and or inferiority,
hmm,
and that usage of passive aggressive behavior
yes,
it was used to manipulate you.
sure. Um, they need let's say the reputation of other people. Like if you have good reputation, they want that reputation for themselves. And in order to have the reputation, they have to slander you one way or the other and find creative way to create some slander about the personality of the other person. Uh, for example, you know, we had so many situations. Like for example, she couldn't. She was teaching my son how to read when he was
Hmm.
very little, and he couldn't concentrate in what he was reading. And one day I was in the public library in New York, in the Bronx, and I saw a little book on one of those games that the children play, you know, on computers. And I figured, oh, it would be really interesting to get a book that interests on a subject that he's interested in, because that's the way I was, you know. I was very easy to read about art and stuff like that, but not interested in reading any other subjects or similar subjects. So I bought the book for my son, and he began to read that book nonstop. He was so happy reading that book. It was a character from one of his video games, and he was reading and reading and reading. And the mother was not happy. Instead of being happy that he was reading, she was not happy. And I understood intuitively, let's say, because I didn't really go too conscious into this, but more or less I knew that there was a game here of competition, that she was not happy because of that. But I wouldn't imagine that she would go as far as taking the book and giving it as a gift to a friend in school.
Hmm.
So at that point, when I said, "Why did you do that?" When he was happy with his book, she said, "Oh, uh, I thought it was positive to do that for the other kid because he needed to learn to read, and I gave it to the father of the, you know, like to the father of the child." of that kid in school. So, in other words, now the book is in their hands. And I said, well, I think you did the wrong thing. You shouldn't give what I give my son or our son. And then she said, oh, not a problem. I will tell them that we need the book back. So she
Mm-hmm.
went and told them, my husband is angry because I gave the book. So I need to have the book back. I don't want any problem with my husband. So now she's making me look like a monster. I didn't want to get that book back. If she gave it up. But I was not expecting her to go and make a whole cinema drama and make me look like a monster in front of this family. So that's one example. And like that example was multiplied many times, many, many, many times. Uh, Different circumstances, even point is that I became isolated from a lot of people. From my friends, I was isolated. From my own family, extended family, I became isolated. Um, my father-in-law was actually my best friend in the beginning. He really liked me, and he came to visit us. The first time that he came to visit us when I bought the house in the year 2000, and this is the first time that we were not together alone. She was now alone with his daughter in the house because she was in bed rest for my daughter. During that week, I don't know what happened. The guy turned around. He was no longer my friend, and
Mm-hmm.
I never understood. It took me 10 years to understand. 10 years later, I knew exactly what happened. She had manipulated him, and one would say, "Why?" Well, now she had the house. We got married, so the next step was to have a divorce and kick me out of the house. And she needed support in that plan. So the support was to convince the parents that I was not a good guy. And that's why they turned around. And if we lasted 10 years, was because I was able to manage the way around the whole thing. Uh, my plan was to wait until the kids got older, like 15 or 16. But that was a bad plan. I think it was a bad thing to do. I was actually already unconsciously afraid of her, to leave her alone with the children. And that was the reason why I remained in the house all the time, not to control things because I had no control of anything. But at least I could, like one day, I was heading to the gym and she had to remain with my son while he did his homework. And she was telling him very negative things like, uh, I need to do things, but I can't because I cannot leave you alone because otherwise you cannot do your work. You need me by your side to do your work, and you're not independent enough. And the kid was so shy, working and saying yes, mom, and just writing his. And I thought she's destroying this kid. At that moment, I canceled my trip to the gym, and I said to her, from now on, you don't tutor his studying. It's me who's going to do it. I don't want you to do it because you're hurting him. And that's exactly what I did. I tutored him. I taught him to play chess and to do different things. And I was really protective of him. With my daughter was another problem because she was the girl and she was closer to the mother. So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want to intervene in this. But my daughter is more like me. She was more like a free spirit, and the mother isn't. And then you would ask her, why would a free spirit like you be with a person like that? And what happened was that after I had my crisis in Paris with my spirituality, I said, the key to these problems has been my free life, my lack of discipline, my lack of religion, my the way I was living. So I began to deny who I was. I began to deny my lifestyle, the music that I was listening to, and I tried to be a good Catholic actually, so that I could have a good family. And I thought this is a good thing for me. And that's how I ended up being with a person different from me because I figured I had something to learn and be better than I was. And what I learned from this experience is that we cannot deny ourselves. We have to be who we are, and to just be who we are, accept ourselves, and bring the shadows into the light, do whatever it is that we need to do. We have to research and study and not fall into any doctrine. That's any doctrine out there, forget about it. You have to like really follow yourself, search, study, and try to do good. And so I made a full circle. I found myself where I started. I think I was wiser actually when I was 20 than when I was 50 at that
But
point.
that is so interesting that you say that, because there is also, should be at least a distinction that between people who are self-aware and
Hmm.
do some sort of introspection, and people who are not. And for example, if we suggest to a psychopath, just be yourself,
Yes,
to be themselves, well, first, it is very destructive to the other people around them.
yes.
And the second, it is so dark for them to face themselves as they really are. They will never be even willing to do that.
Hmm.
So, for them to behave as they truly are without any inhibitions and without any charm that they impose on other people, that would
Hmm.
be a scary picture. So, for those people like that, for the narcissists, for the psychopaths, this may not be a good advice to be what you are, because all of those religious currents,
Hmm.
philosophical, uh, they all adhere to some sort of
Sure.
moral qualities that we
Yeah.
must possess in order to live in peace with each other.
Sure, sure. But for the psychopath, it's another story because
Mhm.
they cannot be themselves because themselves, is like, it's not themselves actually. Being yourself is who you are in the logical sense, in the reasonable sense. But when you are not yourself, you cannot, and you're acting because a psychopath is just acting. It's an act to cover who they are. So, you know, actually, their work is to uh, impede you from stopping you from knowing who they are. You see, they have to wear like a custom, a mask, and this is
And
how
that
they
mask becomes who they are.
exactly, exactly.
Well, psychopathy and narcissism, they are both personality traits that have been extensively studied in psychology, and
Hmm.
they do show a significant correlation.
Hmm.
So, if we define psychopathy as being characterized by persistent antisocial behavior,
Mm.
impaired empathy and remorse, bold, disinhibited, egotistical traits, uh, we at the same time, narcissism is characterized by grandiosity, need for admiration, lack of
Hmm.
empathy. So um, the correlation here, if we look at that, could be that both psychopathy and narcissism, they share common features such as lack of empathy, superficial charm,
Hmm.
tendency to manipulate others for personal gain. And like you
Sure.
said, wearing the mask that has become an inherent skin. Essentially, this is the second skin that they wear that they cannot shed off,
Hmm.
of course. And for example, grandiose narcissism is especially correlated with psychopathic traits, including exploitative behavior and sense of entitlement.
Hmm.
Uh,
Entitlement. Yeah.
oh, yes, yes, everything belongs to them.
Mm.
And in fact, in grandiose narcissism, everything is easily seen, right? It's right there in front of you. But with covert narcissism, it is not so. It takes a while to figure it out.
Mm.
Well, While both psychopathy and narcissism, they involve self-centeredness, narcissism typically emphasizes a desire for admiration and recognition, whereas psychopathy includes a more pronounced tendency toward antisocial behavior and lack of
Hmm.
guilt or
Yes.
remorse.
Okay, it's good to know that. Yeah.
But nevertheless, they overlap. They overlap, and if we were talking about the vulnerable narcissism,
Hmm.
uh, which is another subtype of narcissism, is less correlated with psychopathy, as it involves hypersensitivity, insecurity, and anxiety. But nevertheless, as much as we know about psychopathy, it is still a topic that will forever be studied.
Hmm.
And that is very interesting to uh, note that while we are living our lives and thinking that everything should go right, we don't notice those little ambiguities, little
Hmm.
incongruities from the very beginning,
Hmm.
because we don't want to believe that. We
Hmm.
turn our blind
Yes.
side, like
Okay.
the horse that has blinders. We go with
Hmm.
blinders, hoping, like, for example, like you're saying that you uh, were a very devoted Catholic. And of course, in Christianity, you have to be also devoted to your family, to your spouse, to your children, have a good
Hmm.
life,
Yes.
create a good life, and be provider for them.
Hmm.
Uh, that also can be blinders, essentially, like horse
Blinders. Yes.
blinders.
Of course, that's the
You
way to
go in
put
one
it.
direction and you do not notice all of
Exactly.
those negative psychopathic narcissistic traits,
Hmm.
which is very important not to be naive in this sense, because
Hmm.
it's quite easy to be naive.
Hmm.
And also, if we're not naive, we can be just busy in our lives. Life happens to us. We get busy with work, with familial obligations, with work obligations, society obligations,
Hmm.
children's activities, our own hobbies, for example, and we don't want to be thinking about it. And especially
Hmm.
with men, men naturally have blinders
Sure.
like horses naturally. So
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
the goal. I am going to go toward that goal. And whatever
Uh-huh.
happens here, I'm going to take care of it somehow, right? I'm going to find a way to solve the problem.
Uh-huh.
And that can be one of the reasons why men just disregard things that happen there, because they may think that, oh, the women are naturally emotional. It is going to pass,
That
right?
makes
Oh,
sense.
keep
Yeah.
your wife happy and your life is going to be happy, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes and quite often it is not possible to make that person happy.
Hmm. That makes sense. A lot of sense. Yeah.
And I'm very sorry that it happened to you. Um, but nevertheless, I know that it is over, and you had.
It's sober to a certain extent, because my son still live in the house with me,
Mhm.
and he sees his mother not very often. It's always like a short encounter for pizza or some meal or whatever, and then he come back, and the ambience is there. You see what I mean? The ambience is the presence is still there, and
Poisonous.
she's it's the mother of my son, and he understand more or less how much detachment I need from this. I spoke to him as much as I could. Like, I didn't want to hear about her trips around the world and about her trip to the Middle East or South America, whatever, because I didn't want to. I want to, just cut away from that. And so he respected that. But there was a manipulation here from the mother, from seeing him for dinner, to tell him about her trip so that he can come and inform me about it, about what she was doing. In the meantime, for years, I had to pay support, alimony, and all of these things that I had to live literally in poverty, because half of my salary was going to this woman. And ironically, it ended with my daughter when she came back home, and she gave up on all the money, the salary, and the alimony. She gave up on everything overnight when they discovered that my daughter had been abandoned by the mother, the law. And but she was fast enough to go to the court and made a case. They're not with me anymore; they're with the father. So now I had another test to go through to prove that I did not abandon the kids, that I was always home and they were with the mother. Nothing happened to her, actually. She was able to manipulate whoever interviewed her. She was like the innocent case.
Always.
Nothing happened to her. We were convinced that she was going to jail. My daughter was convinced. At a certain point, my daughter wanted to sue her for neglect. And I mean, I worked in the court system, but I never heard of anybody suing their parents or anything like that. So I said to her, listen, I don't think it's a good idea that you get involved in this, just
Hmm.
let it go. And we tried to figure things out. And at that moment, I profited to let her know that I was there, looking after her too, that I was her dad and that I was here to help her, whatever help she needed. And she was with me, but she was going through her syndrome already, like really trying to find herself. And and she left. She left again. She left the house. Of course, she's independent. And I remained like more aware of the problem after this situation, more aware of what passive aggressiveness was, what the word psychopath really meant, what the rest now was the struggle for myself to heal, because I I divorced like almost 14 years ago, and only had one relationship that lasted like 4 months. So I still, when I left her, when we got divorced, I mean, the pain was profoundly for my children, because I couldn't really be without my children, and I still remember when they left and the door slammed after they left. That's still in my head. It was so painful that I did not want to be with another woman again. I didn't want to have a relationship again. I just didn't know how to do it. I just didn't know how to break away from the spell of the world that I came from.
And you said, Victor, you mentioned such a profound phrase to me before, that after these relationships, uh, men are like zombies.
Like
They're
zombies.
looking for their soul
That's
continuously
exactly,
and
yes.
are unable to find it.
Yes, that's exactly how I felt. And I, I heard someone mentioning that, and I said, wow, that's me. But I have to also say on a on a brighter side that I'm finding myself more. I'm finding myself more, and I take it very personal, spiritually. I take it very spiritually. I say to myself, this thing, this journey was for a reason. Now that I'm 70 years, I mean, like I'm not going to live 50 more years. I'm 70 already. So I have to do the best I can. So I'm trying to I noticed that in my life, a lot of my time was wasted on relationships, on meeting people. When I was younger, I was very popular, and I had many girlfriends, so I was kind of invested in that more than to my dreams as an artist. And I took the art as a second part time. It developed into that until I finally woke up at a certain point when I was 25. Had a good relationship at the time, my first wife, and I was able to become an artist. But there is so much that I have to do. For example, I want to write books. I want to finish my memoirs about all these things to get it off my chest, about what happened in between this experience and my life as an artist. and what happened to me spiritually through all that path, being, wow, like Catholic for almost 30 years, and then ethically Jewish for the last 10 years, monotheistic, Um, there had to do, when I say there has to do something with like reincarnation or something like that, because it's almost like some baggage that I'm carrying from somewhere. I don't know from where. It couldn't be when I was a child. It had to be before that, you know. And I have to accomplish what I came to accomplish before I go, And I cannot really waste my time in something that is not meant, and something that is not really like destined, like a relationship, like for just not being alone or something like this. And basically that's how I've been structuring myself recently, and I find more peace with that because I feel like I'm doing something. But that said, I wish I could be with someone by the time I died. I mean, like to be with people, to to find love again, and to share my life with somebody who's at the same level. We're at the same level. We're at the same experience.
But by
Although,
doing all this, Victor, you will be able to find your soul. This is what it
yes,
is. You will no longer be a zombie. Zombies are, in fact, they are vacant, they are
hmm,
empty, looking for what they have lost,
yes,
supposedly. But by doing what you are here to do,
yes,
you are on a path to find your soul and to
hmm,
restore it. And to tell you the truth, any person that comes along before the soul is restored back in your body will be a wrong person, because people will be coming to resemble your destruction as you are in now. And I'm not saying you particularly, but people who find themselves in these situations. And we need to know that, because we need to take time to
hmm,
heal and not
hmm,
necessarily build relationships at that time, because anything that comes along is going to just resemble our misery and the lack of happiness, lack
hmm,
of self-understanding. uh, of course, I'm not saying that the bad people with bad intentions would come. Most of the time people could come with good intentions, and in fact, even the woman who is healthy, who is on your level, is going to imagine that she probably came into your life a year ago, but you were not where you needed to be. So it is absolutely important to do what you love to do, to recover from that, and actually understand that you are not alone, to
hmm,
gather as much information to understand what you went through, and to do what you came on this earth to do. And by
hmm,
doing that, you will find your soul, and the right person will come along after that. And I strongly believe
absolutely.
that, because I've seen so many cases uh, of that, and happiness is possible after
Hmm,
such destructive relationship. Because we shouldn't give our power
hmm,
to people who want to destroy us forever.
exactly. Yes, that's very hopeful to hear. And I'm in the path to finding my soul again. I think I found quite a bit of it already. And I don't know, as I'm listening to you, I just feel so empathic for the people who are not figuring it out, or who are longer into this, or feel that their soul has been lost and not recovered. I mean, it's like become my blessings, in a certain way.
There's hope.
There's hope. That's the key word, hope.
Hope, and we must take action for that, toward that hope, because we can't just sit still and hoping that something is going to change. We must take action and find that strength in us to get
Exactly.
up and move on with our lives.
Hmm.
It's
That's
easier said than done, people may say, but nevertheless, we can't just sit in that pitiful chair, filled with pity and the tears, of course, that we hide from other people.
Yeah,
Nevertheless, there's time when we must get up and move on with our lives. And by
sure.
just moving on with our lives, things will get right.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. It only takes one time to make an effort to do something and to move and to do things, And then after that, one is rolling, one is doing it again.
Yes, I'm
Uh,
so excited because I know that you're writing memoirs.
yes, I am. I am.
What are those memoirs about?
Well, it's about the first one is about my artist call. When I felt
Hmm.
the whole process. I want to pay, honor and respect to my uncle and the people who were good influence on me, my aunt who gave me an encyclopedia, because I lived in an environment where there was no books, no libraries. And when I was growing up, and then they were so conscious of this, and they kept put the books in front of me and did these things. And then, of course, my my connection and my destiny in Paris, going to Paris as another thing for me, because that started with a movie also. I saw The Hunchback of Notre Dame,
Mm.
and I felt very empathic with the Hunchback because he was deaf, and both of my parents are deaf, and so I understood what was going on, with this character. I felt very empathic, and then that empathy brought me into this Middle Ages in Paris, what was happening, the
Hmm.
goodwill of the person. My father had an amazing goodwill. He was like the archetype of Abraham for me, my father, and his mercy with the people and the poor and giving them money. As a matter of fact, my first concept of God was given to me through my father by giving me a coin to give to a woman who was begging for money.
Hmm.
And then when I came back to my father, he told me in sign language with the gestures of the sign language, which are very impressive, how moved God was in heaven by my act of charity with the poor lady there. And I looked at the sky, I just knew God was love and he was infinite. And I was only like 3.5 years old. So all of this mingled together in that story by looking at the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Paris, and I knew I was heading that way. So those 10 years were incredible. Like what I went through, learning the language and becoming myself and all of that. So that's a book right there. Then the whole book of the spirituality, how it happened to me in Paris, how I became Catholic, because I come from a Protestant upbringing. As a matter of fact, from an anti Catholic family. So that was the most unlikely thing to go through. But in France, it's very different because I noticed that Catholicism is different in every country you visit. It depends with the culture, how they deal with it. And France
Hmm.
has a powerful Catholicism, as Jean Paul II said. France is the elder daughter of the church, which meant it was the first king who got baptized and baptized everybody, the whole army and everybody in his kingdom to become Catholic. So that aura, that kind of entity and archetype is in that country. So when you are there, Catholicism doesn't feel like Catholicism. It feels like Protestant almost, because it's like what you feel in America. It's more intellectual. People read, people write about it, they discuss, they have beautiful churches, and it is definitely involved with a lot of intellectuals
I have
thinking.
noticed that. I have
Yeah,
noticed that visiting France, and I was perplexed by that. And now you just answered my question.
yeah, and that kind of inspired me a lot, particularly in the monastery that I went. And I found somebody gave me a book about a famous writer, Wisman, and Wisman became a convert. and he wrote, and he in that monastery where I was staying, he wrote that book, and I'm reading this book, and that kind of like, wow, this is great. I could identify with the writer. But
You know how many people will be able to identify with your writing after you publish your memoirs?
I hope so.
As
I hope
you were able to identify yourself with all those writers, so other people will be moved and be able to identify themselves and be on the path of
so.
healing
Amen.
and self
I think so.
restoration. This
Yes.
is incredible, incredible, incredible. Your life story is very interesting. Unfortunately, we are out of time,
Time.
and I hope
Yes.
that we can continue our
Later.
conversation later. Yes, thank you so much for coming on
You're
our
very
show.
welcome. It was beautiful, a magical time as usual.
I know it's not easy to share these experiences, but nevertheless, it is healing. It's
Yeah.
healing to write about it, it's healing to talk about it, to possibly receive some answers. So I encourage everyone to come up. And to come through with their stories as well, and to
Yeah.
find their peace and
Of
balance,
course, particularly men, because not too many
particularly
men.
men,
Yeah, exactly.
because it's difficult for men to even open up and talk about it. That is why I hope to give men this outlet in order to share their stories, to be heard and understood, and possibly get some answers. So,
Amen.
thank you very much for
You're very
being here.
welcome. Okay.
And we have been live on United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM, on Be Honest with Dr. Yana. And here we are honest about everything. So please join us next Friday at noon Pacific time. We will be discussing more interesting topics that you will not want to miss. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next Friday.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.